Murder, but make it professional. Throughout human history, some people decided that the most efficient career path was removing other people from existence. Not through war, not through duels, but through the careful, calculated art of killing specific targets for money, religion, or political gain. And honestly, some of them got terrifyingly good at it. We're talking organizations that operated for centuries, individuals who racked up body counts in the hundreds, and techniques so effective they're still studied by intelligence agencies today. Buckle up, because this is the history of humanity's most lethal specialists. They literally invented the word assassin. Let's start with the order of assassins, because they're not just historical footnotes, they're the reason we have the word assassin in the first place. Founded in 1090 AD by Hassan-i Sabbah, a man who combined religious fanaticism with the organizational skills of a Fortune 500 CEO, the Nizari Ismailis built an empire of fear that would make any modern spy agency jealous. For nearly 2 centuries, they conducted targeted killings that reshaped the political landscape of the medieval Middle East. Hassan-i Sabbah was born around 1050 in Qom, Persia, which is modern-day Iran. He studied theology in the city of Ray, and at about 17 years old, he converted to the Ismaili faith. In 1076, he traveled to Egypt for religious training, staying there for approximately 3 years. When he returned to Iran, he came back with a business plan: seize an impenetrable mountain fortress, and build a network of highly trained killers who would reshape the political landscape of the Middle East. The man had ambition. In 1090, Hassan-i Sabbah captured the fortress of Alamut through infiltration rather than siege. His supporters inside the garrison simply opened the gates. No bloody battle, no lengthy siege, just patient planning and a well-placed bribe. This was corporate espionage before corporations existed. The fortress sat on a steep rock in the Alborz Mountains, nearly impossible to assault by conventional means. From this eagle's nest, Hassan-i Sabbah would orchestrate a campaign of terror that lasted longer than most modern nations have existed. For the next 35 years, Hassan-i Sabbah never left his modest quarters in Alamut Castle, except to climb to the rooftop twice. He spent his time reading, writing, praying, and orchestrating a campaign of targeted killings that terrified every sultan, vizier, and caliph within striking distance. Legend says he was friends with the Persian polymath Omar Khayyam during their student years. Whether true or not, Hassan-i Sabbah was certainly a scholar himself, with expertise in mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. The man running the murder organization was basically a professor. His agents, called fidai or devotees, would spend years infiltrating enemy courts. They learned languages, adopted local customs, built trust with their targets. A fidai might serve a vizier for 5 years as a trusted servant before receiving orders to strike. These weren't random murders. Each target was carefully selected to destabilize rivals while minimizing civilian casualties. The order specifically avoided killing innocent bystanders. It was assassination as precision surgery, with a religious justification that made the killers feel like holy warriors rather than murderers. The order operated for nearly 200 years, killing hundreds of high-profile targets. Their victims included the Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk in 1092, multiple caliphs, and countless military commanders. When the Crusaders arrived in the Levant, the assassins added European targets to their list. They were equal opportunity killers, striking Muslims and Christians with the same cold efficiency. The Mongols finally destroyed the order in 1256, systematically dismantling their fortress network. Most of the historical records about them were written by their enemies, which is why we have the whole hashish myth. The name Hashashin probably derives from asasiyun, meaning people faithful to the foundation of the faith, but people who are high on drugs, made for better propaganda. So that's the version that stuck. Marco Polo's account, written decades after the order's destruction, popularized the idea that Hassan-i Sabbah drugged his followers into obedience using hashish and promises of paradise. Modern historians consider this fantasy. The word assassin literally comes from medieval propaganda about these guys. Talk about a legacy that outlasts the facts. Rome's official poisoner had a LinkedIn profile. If Hassan-i Sabbah was the CEO of assassination, Locusta of Gaul was the freelance consultant. Active in 1st century Rome, Locusta turned poison making into a legitimate career path, eventually earning the official title of imperial poisoner under Emperor Nero. Yes, that was an actual job title. Human resources in ancient Rome was absolutely wild, and Locusta proves that if you're good enough at something terrible, powerful people will find a use for you. Locusta's origins are murky, but she appears to have come from Gaul, what we now call France. She built her reputation through a combination of expertise and discretion, becoming so skilled at her craft that she attracted attention from Rome's highest circles. By 54 AD, she was already notorious enough to be imprisoned on poisoning charges when Empress Agrippina the Younger came calling with a job offer. When the Empress needs a poisoner, you don't ask questions. Agrippina needed someone dead, specifically her husband, Emperor Claudius. She had married him primarily to advance her son Nero's claim to the throne, and Claudius had outlived his usefulness. Locusta had the skill set. According to the ancient sources, she provided a poison that was hidden in a dish of mushrooms, Claudius's favorite food. When the first dose proved insufficient, Agrippina reportedly applied atropa belladonna to a feather used to induce vomiting. The emperor died, and Agrippina's son Nero took the throne. Mission accomplished. Here's where it gets wild. Nero liked Locusta's work so much that he hired her again almost immediately. His target was Britannicus, Claudius's biological son and a potential rival to the throne. The 14-year-old boy represented everything Nero feared, a legitimate heir with support among the Roman elite. Locusta's first attempt was too slow, prompting Nero to personally flog her and threaten execution. Nothing motivates like job insecurity and imperial violence. Her second formula worked beautifully. Britannicus died at a dinner party in 55 AD, right in front of the guests. He drank cold water laced with Locusta's improved recipe and collapsed almost immediately. Nero explained it away as an epileptic seizure, and nobody present was stupid enough to argue with the emperor. The boy was cremated that same night, before any examination could take place. Ancient Roman cover-ups weren't subtle, but they didn't need to be when the emperor ordered them. Nero rewarded Locusta handsomely. He granted her freedom from prison, gave her large country estates, and issued a full pardon for all previous murders. He also commissioned her to train students in the art of poison-making. She essentially ran an assassination trade school with imperial backing. Nero even kept a vial of her most potent creation in a golden box for personal use, presumably as insurance against his many enemies. The emperor who watched his poisoner work apparently wanted to keep that option available for himself. When Nero committed suicide in 68 AD, fleeing Rome as his enemies closed in, the new emperor Galba cleaned house. He had Locusta march through Rome in chains before executing her publicly. Her career, documented by historians Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio, proves that being good at your job only protects you as long as your patron is alive. She served the worst of Rome's emperors, and died when the empire briefly tried to be better. Some legacies are complicated. The Jewish dagger squad, who pioneered public assassination. Before modern terrorism developed its playbook, there were the Sicarii, operating in 1st century Judea during the Roman occupation. These Jewish extremists pioneered the concept of public assassination as political theater. Their name comes from the Latin sica, meaning dagger, because subtlety in naming wasn't their priority. These were the original zealots, a word that literally comes from the movement they emerged from. The Sicarii emerged around 54 AD from the broader zealot movement opposing Roman rule. While the zealots advocated armed resistance in the form of guerrilla warfare, the Sicarii took a more targeted approach. Find Roman collaborators and Roman officials, stab them in public during crowded events, then disappear into the panicked crowd. It was terrorism before anyone had a word for it. Their signature move was attending festivals and religious gatherings, the busiest and most chaotic places in Jerusalem. During Passover or other major holidays, tens of thousands of pilgrims packed the city streets. The Sicarii would position themselves near their targets, wait for the optimal moment of confusion, then use small curved daggers concealed under their cloaks to eliminate their targets. After each killing, they would join the screaming crowd and pretend to be horrified bystanders. By the time anyone figured out what happened, the killers had vanished. It was assassination as performance art, designed to create terror far beyond the immediate violence. According to historian Josephus, who remains basically our only contemporary source for Sicarii activities, their victims included the high priest Jonathan, killed in Jerusalem's temple courtyard. They also allegedly killed 700 Jewish women and children at Ein Gedi, suggesting they weren't exclusively focused on Roman targets. Anyone they considered a traitor or obstacle was fair game. Josephus, who had complicated feelings about his own people's resistance movements, described them variously as bandits, terrorists, and religious fanatics. The methods the Sicarii pioneered would echo through history. Attack in crowds where security is stretched thin. Use easily concealed weapons. Blend with innocent bystanders after the strike. Target symbolic figures to maximize psychological impact. These techniques appear in basically every terrorist manual ever written, which makes the Sicarii unfortunate innovators in the field of political violence. The Sicarii's most famous moment came at Masada in 73 AD. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, the Roman military systematically crushed Jewish resistance across the region. A group of Sicarii took refuge in the fortress of Masada, a virtually impregnable stronghold overlooking the Dead Sea. The Romans laid siege with approximately 9,000 soldiers, building a massive ramp to breach the walls. When the Romans finally broke through, they found the compound burned, and nearly all 960 defenders dead by suicide. Only 2 women and 5 children survived to tell the story. To this day, historians debate whether Masada represents heroic resistance or fanatical cult behavior. The Israeli military used to hold swearing-in ceremonies at the site, though that practice has become controversial. Either way, The word sicario still means assassin in Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. The Sicarii were destroyed by Rome, but their linguistic legacy outlasted their movement by 2,000 years. The thugs who made strangling a religious sacrament. India's contribution to assassination history is the Thuggee cult, a network of organized killers who operated from roughly the 13th century until British suppression in the 1830s. These were travelers who would join caravans, earn the trust of fellow travelers over days or weeks, and then strangle them with a yellow ceremonial cloth called a rumal. The English word thug comes directly from them, which means every time someone calls a criminal a thug, they're unknowingly referencing a cult of ritual stranglers who worship the goddess Kali. The Thuggees believed they were serving a divine purpose. According to their mythology, they were Kali's children, created from her sweat to maintain the cosmic balance between good and evil. Without their killings, the world would become unbalanced, and chaos would follow. Each murder was a religious offering, performed according to specific rituals and taboos. They would not kill women, children, or certain castes. They had rules about which days were appropriate for killing, and which were not. It was organized murder with a theology behind it. Their method was elegant in its simplicity. A Thuggee band would infiltrate a group of travelers, often posing as merchants or pilgrims. They would travel together for days, sometimes weeks, building relationships and gaining trust. When the moment was right, typically at night in an isolated location, they would strike. The strangulation method was preferred because it was quiet, left no blood evidence, and required no specialized weapons beyond a piece of cloth. After each killing, they would carefully bury the bodies in pre-selected locations and divide the stolen goods according to internal hierarchies. The most infamous Thuggee leader was Thug Behram, active in the Oud district between 1790 and 1840. The Guinness Book of World Records credits him with 931 victims, making him potentially the most prolific individual killer in recorded history. However, this number deserves serious scrutiny. According to records from the British officer who captured him, Behram claimed to have been present at 931 murders but personally strangled about 125 victims. Still horrific, but significantly less than the headline number. The distinction matters for understanding both the man and the propaganda surrounding him. William Sleeman, the British officer who made suppressing Thuggee his life's work, used informants and captured thugs to map the network across India. His first major breakthrough came when he captured a thug named Farinkia, who agreed to turn informant and led Sleeman to a mass grave containing 100 bodies. By 1840, Sleeman had effectively dismantled the organization, arresting and executing thousands of thugs while documenting their methods in obsessive detail. Modern historians debate how much of the Thuggee threat was real and how much was colonial propaganda. Scholar Martine van Werkens argues in her book, The Strangled Traveler, that the Thuggee were partly an invention of British, Oriental imagining, exaggerated to justify colonial expansion. The British had strong incentives to portray India as barbaric and in need of civilizing intervention. Thuggee suppression became a celebrated example of British beneficence, whether or not the threat matched the hype. Regardless of these debates, Behram was hanged in 1840, and the word thug entered English to stay. Japan's ninja were actually more spies than assassins. Everyone knows about ninjas: black pajamas, throwing stars, smoke bombs, vanishing into shadows, superhuman martial arts abilities. What most people don't know is that historical shinobi were primarily spies and saboteurs rather than assassins, and they dressed in dark blue rather than black because pure black actually stands out at night against most backgrounds. Hollywood lied to you. Again. The real ninja were less supernatural killing machines and more practical intelligence operatives. The ninja emerged during Japan's Sengoku period, roughly the 15th and 16th centuries, when constant warfare between feudal lords created demand for unconventional military specialists. The regions of Iga and Koga became famous training grounds because their mountainous terrain made them naturally resistant to feudal authority. While the rest of Japan organized under lords and samurai hierarchies, these regions maintained autonomy through a combination of geography and skills that made them valuable to everyone and owned by no one. Local communities organized into armed bands that developed expertise in guerrilla warfare, espionage, and yes, occasionally assassination. But the primary job was intelligence gathering. Shinobi would infiltrate enemy castles, map fortifications, count troops, assess supply lines, and report back to their employers. According to historian Yamada Yuji of the International Ninja Research Center at Mie University, the shinobi's main task was obtaining crucial information through infiltration, not killing high-profile targets. Unlike samurai, who followed the honor code of Bushido, requiring face-to-face combat and formal challenges, shinobi specialized in precisely the tactics that samurai considered dishonorable: ambush, infiltration, poisoning, and deception. This made them both invaluable and socially despised. Warlords needed their skills but couldn't publicly acknowledge using them. The famous Hattori Hanzo, often cited as history's most legendary ninja, was actually a samurai who commanded ninja forces rather than a ninja himself. Even the most celebrated shinobi existed in a gray zone between respectability and contempt. Training began in childhood and included swimming, climbing, map reading, poison making, and weapons handling. The Bansen Shukai, a 1676 ninja manual compiled after the peaceful Edo period began, details everything from infiltration techniques to medicinal recipes to psychological manipulation tactics. Their weapon arsenal included shorter, less curved swords, worn diagonally for easier movement through confined spaces, shuriken for distraction rather than killing, smoke bombs, and specialized climbing tools like metal claws and caltrops. The supernatural abilities attributed to ninjas, flying, invisibility, shape-shifting, walking on water, were probably exaggerated stories spread either by ninjas themselves for intimidation purposes or by their victims to explain how they were so thoroughly outsmarted. If you got infiltrated by a ninja, claiming he had supernatural powers was less embarrassing than admitting you simply got outmaneuvered. The unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate in the early 1600s ended the constant warfare that created demand for ninja services. Peace made spies less necessary. Many former shinobi families became security guards for the shogunate, doctors, medicine sellers, merchants, martial arts instructors, or fireworks manufacturers. Their explosives expertise translated well to entertainment. Their espionage functions transferred to new government organizations like the Onmitsu and Oniwaban. Today, ninjutsu survives as a martial art, and the Iga Ueno region operates museums dedicated to ninja history. The myth became bigger than the reality ever was, but the reality was still pretty impressive for a bunch of peasants who learned to outsmart samurai. Poison maidens are either history's greatest assassins or greatest myth. If you want to talk about assassination methods that sound too good to be true, let's discuss the Vishkanya of ancient India. According to legend, these were young women raised from childhood on carefully calibrated doses of poison until their very blood and bodily fluids became toxic. Kings would then deploy them as living weapons, sending beautiful poisonous women to seduce and kill enemy leaders. The original femme fatale, except literally fatal. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder where history ends and spy fiction begins. The concept appears in the Arthashastra, an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft written by Chanakya, advisor to Emperor Chandragupta Maurya, around 300 BC. Chanakya discusses Vishkanyas as one of many weapons in a ruler's arsenal, alongside conventional spies, double agents, propaganda campaigns, and economic warfare. The man was basically writing The Prince 1700 years before Machiavelli. According to the text, these poison maidens would disguise themselves as dancers or courtesans, approach their targets, and kill them through intimate contact. The training process described in various legends is nightmarish, if true. Young girls would be selected and fed tiny doses of poison starting in early childhood. Many would die during the process, but those who survived would develop immunity, while their bodily fluids became toxic to anyone without that immunity. By puberty, supposedly, they could kill a man through a kiss, a bite, or intimate relations. They could even eat poisoned food in front of their targets to prove it was safe, knowing their own immunity would protect them while the target died. The historical evidence for Vishkanyas is extremely thin, relying almost entirely on legend and literary sources, rather than verified historical records. One famous story claims that a Vishkanya was sent to kill Chandragupta Maurya himself, but was redirected by the clever Chanakya to eliminate a rival instead. Another legend suggests that Alexander the Great died from embracing a Vishkanya, given to him as a gift by a defeated Indian king. Neither story has credible historical support. Alexander almost certainly died of fever, possibly typhoid, not poisonous seduction. The practice of Mithridatism, building poison immunity through gradual exposure, is scientifically real but limited in scope. King Mithridates, the sixth of Pontus, famously protected himself against assassination by consuming small doses of various poisons throughout his life. When he tried to commit suicide by poison after defeat by Rome, he found himself immune and had to be killed by a soldier. So the concept has historical precedent, but the idea of someone becoming so poisonous that their touch kills is biological fantasy. The body doesn't work that way. The Vishkanya probably represent a combination of real palace intrigues involving female assassins, which definitely existed throughout history, and legendary exaggeration over centuries of storytelling. They're less historical fact and more the world's oldest spy movie trope, the seductive killer who uses beauty as a weapon. The concept has appeared in Indian literature for over 2,000 years, which suggests it touches something deep in human psychology about the fear of intimacy and betrayal. Modern hitmen industrialized murder. Let's fast forward to the 20th century, when assassination became a professional service with organizational structures, operational security protocols, and occasionally even health benefits. Okay, not health benefits, but the Sicilian mafia certainly organized murder into a bureaucratic process that would have impressed Hassan-i Sabbah. Giuseppe Greco, known as Pino the Shoe, became one of the deadliest contract killers in modern history during the Second Mafia War between 1981 and 1983. This was a conflict between rival Sicilian crime families that killed approximately 1,000 people in just 2 years, and Greco was at the center of the violence. He led a death squad called the Corleonesi that eliminated anywhere from 60 to 300 people, depending on which estimates you believe. Greco was only officially convicted of 58 murders, many committed with an AK-47, which shows impressive commitment to efficiency over subtlety. His methods for body disposal included dissolving corpses in vats of acid, a technique called lupara bianca, that meant victims simply disappeared without trace. He also reportedly fed bodies to pigs on rural farms. The man understood both execution and cleanup, treating murder as a complete operational package. He was murdered by his former associates in 1985, because the mafia equivalent of corporate restructuring tends to be permanent. Live by professional violence, die by professional violence. Brazilian hitman Julio Santana holds the unofficial record for modern professional killing, with claims of over 492 confirmed victims, and possibly more than 500 total. Brazilian and international media have called him the deadliest hitman in history. He operated for decades across rural Brazil before being identified by authorities, taking contracts from landowners, politicians, and criminals who needed problems solved permanently. The fact that someone could kill that many people over that many years without being caught says something disturbing about the environments where professional killers operate. Russian assassin Alexander Solonik, nicknamed Superkiller, eliminated numerous high-ranking rival mobsters with a precision that earned him legendary status in organized crime circles. A former Soviet military officer kicked out for brutal interrogation methods, Solonik mastered martial arts and firearms before becoming a freelance killer for Russian organized crime. He was ambidextrous and reportedly could shoot accurately with both hands simultaneously. After escaping from Russian prison multiple times, he fled to Greece to start his own assassination ring before being killed by rivals in 1997. The American mob had Murder, Incorporated, an enforcement arm that operated from the 1930s through the 1940s as a for-hire killing service used by Italian-American and Jewish organized crime. Killers like Abe Kid Twist, Relis perfected the use of ice picks to cause cerebral hemorrhages, a method that left minimal evidence and could look like natural causes to inexperienced coroners. Relis himself eventually turned informant, leading to numerous convictions before mysteriously falling from a hotel window while under police protection. Even witnesses against professional killers weren't safe. What separates modern hitmen from historical assassins is specialization and market economics. Ancient assassins like the Sicarii killed for ideology. The Hassan killed for religious and political goals. Locusta worked directly for imperial patrons. Modern professional killers operate in a marketplace where murder is simply a service with supply and demand, payment terms, and quality guarantees. The romanticism is gone, replaced by invoices and operational security. History's deadliest assassins may have been more dramatic, but the ones working today have better accountants. The business of death has never actually closed. From Hassan-i Sabbah's mountain fortress to the back rooms of Sicilian social clubs, assassination has remained one of humanity's most persistent professions. The methods changed, the motives evolved, the technology improved, but the basic transaction stayed the same. Someone wanted someone else dead and was willing to pay, pray, or persuade for the service. The Order of Assassins gave us vocabulary and tactics still studied in intelligence services. Their concept of deep cover infiltration, waiting years for the right moment to strike, appears in every spy manual ever written. Locusta proved that chemistry could be weaponized long before modern toxicology existed, and her patron-client relationship with imperial power mirrors how states still use deniable assets today. The Sicarii demonstrated that public violence creates political impact far beyond the immediate body count, a lesson unfortunately relearned throughout modern history. The Thuggees built a murder cult that operated for centuries under the guise of religious devotion, showing how ideology can sustain organized violence across generations. The ninja became history's most overmarketed spies, their legend outgrowing their reality, while their actual contributions to espionage tradecraft remain underappreciated. The Vishkanya became legend whether they existed or not, their story touching fears about intimacy and betrayal that persist across cultures. And modern hitmen prove that anything, even professional killing, can be industrialized, standardized, and scaled. The deadliest assassins in history weren't necessarily the ones with the highest body counts. They were the ones who changed how we think about political violence, who invented techniques that persist today, who turned murder from chaos into craft. Whether that's disturbing or fascinating probably says something about you as a viewer. But hey, you made it this far through a comprehensive tour of history's professional killers. At least you're well informed about the history of specialized violence. Your dinner party conversations just got significantly darker, and honestly, you're welcome.